The 350 Rand grant has come to an end. That was a very special COVID-19 relief grant that the government introduced to help South Africans affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. There have been growing calls to continue the grant and even to increase and make it a basic income grant for adults in South Africa. But how feasible is this in a struggling economy like South Africa? Well, to discuss this, let me bring in Duma Gqubule, economist first. I'm hoping to be joined by Black Sash's Lynette Maart shortly, who've been very vocal in calling for a basic universal income grant. Mr. Gqubule, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Just from an economic point of view, what would your response be, or main point to make around the calls, the growing calls for a basic income grant in South Africa?
Okay, first of all, Dan, I think people need to understand that this once-in-a-century pandemic, the response by major developed and developing countries was to spend their way out of the crisis. They spent $16 trillion to stimulate the economy. And they decided that that's the only way to fight this pandemic. And every single country that implemented the stimulus packages could not afford it. But they decided that it is better that we stimulate our economies. But South Africa, what we're doing, we are withdrawing 265 billion rands from our economy over the next 3 years, which is complete insanity in the face of such desperate deprivation amongst our people. In my area, people are still queuing for this grant. Maybe people don't understand that the grant has been stopped. And the government was done, over the next 3 years, governments will be reducing social spending by 36 billion rands. They will also have below inflation increases for almost every single grant that we're seeing. And I think that people need to understand the level. 1 in 5 households have experienced hunger in 7 days, according to the latest survey, and 1 in 6 households have experienced child hunger. On top of that, the unemployment rate for black Africans is 47%, and the unemployment rate for black African females is 51%. In the Eastern Cape, where half my family comes from, the unemployment rate is 51%. Now, in that environment, we have to do anything that we can to stimulate the economy. Now, many people are calling for this SRD to be extended for the few months until government implements this basic income grant. Now, the people must look at the benefits of this grant and not just look at the headline costs.
Okay, so hold on, Mr. Gqubule, before you continue. Your device is shaking. I don't know if you are moving the desk or something. There's too much movement and it's not good for the eye. Sorry about that. On the basic income grant, what was the point you wanted to make? Sorry, sir.
Now, I'm saying that the basic income grant, many people are calling it to be at the upper poverty line of about 1,268 rands a month. Now, this thing, people must look at the net cost of it, not the gross cost. So let's say we put it at 1,200 and maybe that's 500 billion rand has been estimated. That will create, there is a multiplier of such spending. It will stimulate growth in the economy that wouldn't have been there in the absence of this grant. So that will create new sources of tax revenues for the country. It will develop local communities, and also there will also be a direct clawback through the tax system, for example, through VAT, that's an automatic 70 billion rand, through income tax. So there are many benefits.
Okay. So from what you are saying, Mr. Gqubule, I gather you are for it, rather than what we're seeing the government choosing austerity over the protection of lives of millions. Let me bring in at this stage Ms. Lynette Maart from Black Sash. Ms. Maart, good afternoon. You've, as Black Sash, have been at the forefront since late last year when October was upon us to say, please, government, extend this special social relief of distress grant, SRD, the COVID-19. And then we came to early this year. You said, please extend from February. It was extended to April, and now it's stopped. So Mr. Gqubule, the economist, is saying it's got benefits for it. But do you think we can afford it? I mean, I'm thinking about the number that he's just mentioned now, Mr. Gqubule. If you use the 1,270, you take the 350 rand grant, you add it to the other grants that have been giving, and you're giving that amount of money. You're running into billions and billions, and we hear from government that there's no money.
Let's phrase it like this. The government started the social relief of distress grant with about 350 rand. And what we are saying is take that up to the food poverty level, which is about just over 500 rand, because what we are dealing with here, first and foremost, is the issue of hunger and just basic poverty and food insecurity. And if we approach it like that, government has given an undertaking that it is interested in pursuing a basic income grant.
Yeah, the minister last year, the Minister of Social Development,
Yes.
Duma Gqubule, in July last year, stated that the government would consider such a grant at around 500 rand a month. But the food poverty line sits under 600. I think it's about 585 rand a month.
That's right. And so what we are saying is begin there. And the fact that government has given at least an undertaking to consider the policy there. And in December, many non-governmental organizations and research institutions were invited to policy. There were a policy document put forward with options and also taking into account the fact that South Africa also has international, not just constitutional obligations, but international obligations to ensure that those with between the ages of 18 to 59 with no or little income has social assistance. And that's sort of what they termed the grant. So the COVID grant came into place during disaster. And what we are saying is, whilst government is working on those proposals, making sure that it gets implemented and there's sufficient budget, there is an overlap, to get that, because there is a move to get that policy in place.
Yeah, I want to explore both with you and Mr. Gqubule the issue of the income grant, because what you are talking about is in the interim, extend what we got from last year, let's call it the COVID relief grant, social relief grant, and maybe while you extend it, increase it to the food poverty line of 585 per month instead of 350. That's as a first step. Yeah. But there's a longer journey here for the country from what Mr. Gqubule was saying that could benefit us further in terms of the economy. I would like to hear your views about that shortly. But before we do that, I'm hoping both of you will be able to listen in. My colleague Mpho, one of our colleagues Mpho, went out and spoke to some people in the streets of Johannesburg just to find out their views about the 350, the extension or not of this COVID-19 grant. Let's take a listen.
For my own opinion, I think it wasn't enough for our people. And to have it to be stopped is not even fair for them, because we're expecting the third wave to be coming. So with the third wave, things could be going even worse than they were, because it's not like anything has changed. It's not like if you go to places like Eastern Cape, 350, and with what people they're complaining about it, there's nothing much that they can do with it. To take it away, it makes it even worse. Do you understand? For me, it's just, it wasn't enough from the beginning. Because with 350, what do you buy? A bag of sugar and meal and all that, and it's finished. And these people, they need to take transport to go to these areas to get this 350. By the time they come back, it's not even 350. It could be, it's 250. So I feel like the government should extend the 350 for those people. It's not fair for them.
For all South Africans, the government has failed for the people. And first of all, I believe that it wasn't enough. It was below what it should have been anyway. But 350 can go a long way, although you can't really buy that much groceries, but it's a help.
Well, some views there, not enough, and taking it away has made it worse. It was not enough even in the first place. Now, Mr. Gqubule, Ms. Maart there from Black Sash saying what they would like to see for now is to get this grant, which has stopped, to be reinstated, but put at 585 rand per month, and as a way to alleviate the poverty. What would your view be?
I would agree with Lynette 100%. Now, let me just give you a scenario. Let's say we put it at the upper poverty line and we spend 500 billion rands over 1 year. There's something called a fiscal multiplier, which is the amount of extra GDP we generate because of government spending. You see, a national budget doesn't operate like a household or a company budget, because when you spend, you increase activity in the economy. Some estimates I've seen of this possible multiplier is around 0.8. So if the government spends 500 billion, 400 billion rand is a stimulus to the economy that much of that will come back to the government in terms of tax revenue. So what we need to be doing is doing everything in our power to stimulate this economy and get our economy growing again. And a basic income grant is a direct infusion of resources into the economy. Why do we as South Africans think we can be different from the rest of the world, where they are stimulating their economies like never before, and we think we must do the opposite by withdrawing money from the economy? It does not make sense. So I don't believe that there is an issue of affordability. Our debt GDP ratio is not high by international standards, because every single country in the world has had the same shock to their GDP and their tax revenues, and that we are in exactly the same relative situation as other countries. On top of that, we have a central bank that can directly finance the government spending. And we've seen in countries like England, 92% of the stimulus was funded by the central bank at 0% interest. There are so many options for our country. The government, the central bank, can provide loans to the government at 0% on favorable terms with payment holidays. The Public Investment Corporation can provide lending to government. We have foreign exchange reserves of 800 billion rand. I believe that's way in excess of what we need as a country. We are giving so many options to the government, but they are mute. They're just not prepared to answer. They're not prepared to listen.
They're not prepared to answer, not prepared to listen. Is that your experience as Black Sash, Ms. Maart? Because I know that you've been engaging, and you said when we started this conversation, at least the government has said it is open to look into a basic income grant or extending currently the social grant. I don't know if you've heard anything. As far as we know, it ended on the 30th of April. Are they listening to you?
Well, we have tried to engage government, I mean, partly the policy spaces in December and also with the National Planning Commission. But subsequent to that, when we delivered the letters to the respective government departments on the 22nd of April, there was an undertaking, at least from DSD, that we can come back and have a meeting to take the issue
Has
forward.
it happened? Has it happened? Has the meeting happened?
No,
since the 22nd of April. It's a long time since the 22nd of April. People are poor, people are hungry, people need the money.
Exactly. So I think we will continue to engage government on this issue. We will also continue to engage in our advocacy spaces. And the media plays a very important role in making sure that item remains.
We are trying. That's why I thought today let's discuss this, because we are now on the second week of May, and it's a bit silent. And we're going to try, we can reach SASSA as well, try to speak to the Social Security Agency itself to find out their thoughts on this and how soon this can move. Of course, we understand Minister Lindiwe Zulu said his head department has applied to Treasury to give money, but we are not hearing anything. And Mr. Gqubule...
And she hasn't come back to us to say what Treasury said on that score. It would be interesting
and
to
Mr.
hear that.
Gqubule saying people must spend, not be austere. Now, that's for the short term. Hopefully, they'll come back and say we're increasing it. There is this issue going forward of a basic income grant, for a universal one for adult, for individuals aged between 18 and 59. And other parts of the world, they've got it. And it helps to really generate activity. And, of course, it's pegged at that upper level of the poverty line, which is about 1,270 rand a month. From a Black Sash perspective, I mean, if that came into place, even when we face a crisis in future, it should really help the poor people, wouldn't it, if you had such a high income grant for adults?
It would indeed help. I mean, I think earlier on we heard figures around 11 million or so of people who are unemployed. Our government hasn't been able to generate sufficient jobs. And even if there's a plan over the next 5 years, we will not be able to create or take over the backlog. Secondly, with COVID also came a renewed energy around technology and technological devices. And we're not quite sure how many jobs are being lost through that process. So the world of work has changed quite dramatically, and so the ways in which jobs are conceived or constructed is slightly different now, and there isn't full employment, and so we need to accept that concept of not full employment, and therefore the social protection system must be designed in such a way that it really also take care of those people who are really unable to find jobs. It's not because people are lazy or that the opportunities are just not there, and they haven't found the jobs.
Yeah, and finally, Ms. Maart, it's a constitutional right. Section 27 of our Constitution,
Yes,
our Bill of Rights, grants that. Parting words very briefly from you, Mr. Gqubule, as we end.
I just want to... There's this myth that we as South Africans spend too much on social security. I've looked at the numbers for other countries. We spend 3.4% of GDP on social security. Many East Asian countries, they spend 3 times more than that on social security. I think we should expand our system of social security. There's this missing middle of people between 18 and 59. It's about 33 million people that we have to plug this hole in our social security system. And I believe that this could be the most... Our government has mismanaged the economy for 27 years. This could be the most transformative measure that the government has introduced since 1994.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gqubule and Ms. Maart, there for your insights as we talk about the need for a new social security system that must recognize that the government has to invest, and that will help generate economic activity. There are calls that are ongoing, and according to Stats SA, 1,270 is at upper level of the food poverty line, and people are saying that's what must inform how much the universal basic income should be.